I never imagined a simple backyard barbecue could turn into a life-or-death showdown, until Karen's screeching complaint lit the fuse. The morning began like any other Saturday. Grills sizzling, kids laughing on sprinklers, my buddy Marcus fresh off a SWAT debrief flipping burgers in his signature tactical tee. Karen, perched on her manicured lawn like a sphinx in pearls, marched across the street wielding her phone. She dialed 911 on speaker, her voice urgent. "There's an armed man threatening my life." My heart froze as she described Marcus by name, accusing him of brandishing a gun. I stepped forward, hands raised, calling out that it was just a harmless cookout when I saw Karen's face twist with vindictive glee. That was the first shock. She wasn't afraid of danger, she craved it. A perverse power trip fueled by months of petty HOA edicts that Marcus and I had quietly mocked. When the sirens wailed in the distance, Karen bolted back to her porch and retrieved a small revolver from beneath her bloomers, taking an unsteady aim at the retreating Marcus. Her finger trembled on the trigger, heart pounding with a mix of fear and righteous self-importance. I froze, torn between rushing to wrest the weapon away and trusting Marcus's instincts. Then came the twist that changed everything. Marcus spun around at the crack of her shot, his SWAT reflexes kicking in. He threw himself flat, scanned for hostiles, and then slowly revealed his badge and radio, broadcasting clear identification. "This is Sergeant Hayes, SWAT Team, County PD," he announced in a calm but firm tone. Karen's eyes went wide as the realization hither would-be victim was the very officer she'd sworn to protect against. The next moments blurred as officers flooded the street, Karen's weapon clattering to the grass and her facade crumbling under the weight of her own lies. In the fallout, I dug into the truth behind Karen's vendetta. Rumor had it she'd been snubbed by Marcus at last week's community safety workshop, corrected her misreading of the fire exit map, and she'd never forgiven the humiliation. Fueled by wounded pride and a thirst for revenge, she weaponized the 911 system and her HOA influence to incite panic. I filed an incident report and obtained the 911 transcript. Her words dripped with malice, praising the thrill of watching officers swarm our street. During the tense HOA hearing that followed, she tried to feign regret, blaming miscommunication and trauma from reading too many crime novels. But I stepped onto the dais and laid bare her deception. I played the dispatch recording, then called Marcus forward to recount how he'd diffused her threat without firing a shot. As her fellow homeowners watched her shoulders slump in shame, the veneer of power Karen had worn for years shattered like glass underfoot. That night, an unexpected ally emerged in the form of Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow whose property line Karen had tried to redraw with spray paint. She'd quietly witnessed Karen's harassment and emerged at my door with affidavits detailing years of petty fines and phony violations imposed on anyone who dared cross Karen's path. Together, we built a coalition of defiance. Neighbors who'd suffered under Karen's mini-tyranny signed letters demanding her removal as HOA president, and local press picked up the story as a portrait of suburban abuse of power. But even as Karen's throne slipped away, I knew the real battle had only just begun. HOA presidents seldom go quietly. She'd already threatened lawsuits for defamation and procedural errors, vowing revenge through endless legal maneuvers. In the climactic confrontation at the county courthouse, Karen appeared surrounded by expensive attorneys, her confidence flickering like a candle in the wind. I walked in, flanked by Marcus in uniform and Mrs. Thompson leaning on her cane, our quiet solidarity more formidable than any retinue of lawyers. When her counsel demanded sanctions against us for harassment, Marcus stepped forward, voice low but unwavering. "You terrorized a community and aimed a loaded weapon at the wrong person. We will not be silenced." The judge, once Karen's ally in parking disputes, leaned forward with a stern gaze and struck down her motions, ordering a permanent injunction barring her from holding any HOA office and imposing hefty penalties for abuse of emergency services. The courtroom erupted in applause, and I felt a rush of vindication unlike any victory before. In the wake of Karen's downfall, our neighborhood transformed. We rewrote the HOA bylaws to include checks and balances, term limits, and transparent vote counts. Monthly block parties replaced fear-fueled meetings, and Marcus offered regular self-defense workshops for seniors. The tension that once lurked behind trimmed hedges gave way to genuine camaraderie, and even Karen's former cronies stepped forward to apologize for closing ranks around her. I hosted a final dinner under string lights in my backyard, 12 tables, laden with dishes donated by every neighbor and raised a glass to the community's resilience. Looking back on the Bear Fence Rebellion and now the SWAT standoff saga, I realize that justice isn't delivered by hammers or handcuffs alone, but by ordinary people summoning the courage to challenge bullies. The shot that Karen fired ricocheted through our lives, but it also spotlighted the rot that festers when power goes unchecked. As twilight settled on our street that evening, I pinned a new wooden sign to my fence: "Stand up or step aside." It wasn't a threat but a promise that here we protect each other, and no one gets to rewrite the rules for personal gain. In the pale light of early winter, our street glowed under frost-kissed lawns and the hush of a neighborhood transformed by one woman's folly and our collective resolve. I stood at my fence before dawn, the cool air biting at my cheeks, and marveled at how far we'd come since Karen's gunshot echoed down the cul-de-sac and rattled our sense of safety. Neighbors emerged from their homes like characters in a story reborn. The Millers carrying hot cocoa in mismatched mugs, Mrs. Delgado wrapping scarves around her grandchildren, the Reyes twins balancing plates of tamales on a porch railing. There was no rancor now, only an unspoken bond woven through every laugh and handshake. I walked down the street, tapping each sturdy post of my Bear Fence turned Unity fence, as if greeting old friends, and felt a swell of gratitude for the barrier that had become a symbol of more than protection. It was a testament to the truth that community thrives when courage overcomes cowardice. That afternoon I hosted a workshop in my garage where Marcus, in full uniform, taught basic tactical awareness to seniors and teenagers alike. He showed them how to clear blind spots around corners, how to recognize the difference between a criminal threat and a neighbor's shadow, and how to communicate calmly in crisis. Walls once plastered with HOA memos now displayed laminated guides on de-escalation and rights under the law. Karen's absence was felt as a quiet vacuum. No more whispered gossip about her next power play. No more frantic calls or hastily printed violation notices. Instead, we piled chairs in a circle, shared stories of petty tyrants we'd endured, and laughed at the absurdity of letting one woman's ego threaten our peace. By midwinter, the new bylaws we drafted went into effect. Term limits for officers, quarterly audits of HOA finances posted online, a clause forbidding any member from unilaterally calling emergency services for non-emergencies, and an annual community vote on major projects. I watched as neighbors logged in from their living rooms, cups of tea in hand, voting by secret ballot on everything from holiday decorations to speed bump installations. The power that had once been hoarded now circulated freely among us, and authority felt less like control and more like responsibility. One cold morning I discovered a gift on my porch, a carved wooden plaque reading "Defend the Peace." It bore no signature, but I knew it came from Mrs. Thompson. Inside was a note thanking me for standing up not just for my own rights but for everyone's. I hung it beside the "Stand Up or Step Aside" sign, and their combined messages shone like beacons against the winter gray. Spring burst forth with cherry blossoms and the promise of renewal. We replaced Karen's bullet-scarred lawn sign with a mural painted by local kids. A mosaic of faces, young, old, families of every stripe standing shoulder to shoulder in front of the Bear Fence, banners overhead proclaiming "Together we rise." The mural became a gathering spot for impromptu concerts, charity drives, and even marriage proposals beneath swaying limbs. Tourists snapped photos and journalists described our block as America's most resilient community. Through it all, Karen faded into rumor. Some said she'd moved back east. Others that she lived under a new name, ever plotting revenge. But without a platform, her threats were whispers against the roar of our solidarity. When I heard she'd filed another lawsuit, this time against a regional paper for defamation, I sighed and forwarded the news to Marcus. He chuckled and responded, "Let her waste her time. We've got bigger things to build." And build we did. A community garden sprang up on the vacant lot where her lawsuit headquarters once stood. Raised beds brimmed with tomatoes, peppers, and sunflowers. At harvest we held a potluck, each dish labeled with its grower's name and a note about the seed's origin. Karen's absence was a gift to our plates. Now, as I write this by sunlight streaming through my kitchen window, I think back on every twist from the Bear Fence that birthed our defiance to the moment a SWAT sergeant laid down his weapon not as an adversary but as a partner in our fight for justice. The oak tree where we once held mediations now shades a bench inscribed, "Where conflict meets compassion." It reminds me that true victory lives not in vanquishing foes, but in forging connections stronger than any blade or bullet. So I ask you readers, when faced with a bully who trades on fear and authority, do you stand your ground or step aside? Share your thoughts on right and wrong below.